Good evening, and welcome to the February 12th meeting of the Livermore City Council. I now call the meeting to order. Let the roll call show that all of the members of the council are present and accounted for. If you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just to check, there was no reportable action in the closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The council did not take a reportable action.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to confirm that. We have no proclamations or presentations. Citizens Forum, I've got about 15 cards here. Typically, we'll take public testimony for about the first 30 minutes, and then we go on to the rest of the meeting's business. And then after that, we'll come back and finish up if we still have additional speakers. So the Citizens Forum is for items that are not on the agenda. The City Council can neither deliberate nor take action on anything during Citizens Forum. I ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And with that, Ken Bradley, David Kent, Mark Palajak. Mr. Bradley.
Actually, I was for item 4.07. You want me to wait and come back?
Oh, you know what? You are. Very good. 4.07. There you go. We'll see you back in a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Good thing somebody's keeping track of this place. Okay. David Kent, Mark Palajak, and Carl Wente.
Oh, I get to go lead off. So,
There you go.
in a former life, I was the editor-in-chief of the Coloradan, a journalist. The Association of Professional Journalists has a code of ethics. You can find it on the internet. Don't contribute money. Don't work in a campaign. Don't lobby on behalf of the news you report upon. The Independent and its owner needs to adhere to this code and stop secretly funding opposition to the city's redevelopment plans. Sunday, the Independent staged a photo op of protesters falsely claiming the council doesn't listen. Other signs read, "Vote out the council." This is clearly a political campaign, created, then funded, and then ultimately reported upon by the Independent. Shortly after the photo was taken, the group of 24 people dispersed. I hope the Independent will disclose to its readers that Friends of Livermore and its reincarnation as the community group are under the economic control of the owner of the paper, and that readers need to form their own conclusions about the reliability of the reporting based on that fact. This disclosure, to be fully ethical, must accompany every piece written on the downtown. It is not sufficient to hide behind a separate reporter or the campaign donations of a spouse. Under the code, a spouse is treated exactly the same as the reporter. Owners matter, not the reporters. Better yet, the Independent should adhere to the ethics code and cease reporting on issues that the owner is lobbying the city on, such as hotel locations. There are also rules on financial conflicts. The first being, don't put yourself in one. But if there is an unavoidable financial conflict, it must be disclosed. Whenever the Independent reports that the group that they are funding is lobbying for a second Bankhead garage to help local businesses, they must disclose that the paper's owner also owns an adjacent office building, which has no parking and will directly benefit from the taxpayers paying $20 million for a parking garage. This garage can increase the value of such an office building by $1 million or more. So I'm an optimist. We haven't missed the deadline for Thursday's paper. Let's all hope that the owner of the Independent will reacquaint herself with the Code of Ethics and properly disclose these financial conflicts and refrain from reporting on political activities that she is personally funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Mark Palajak, Carl Wente, Rick Nordyke.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, Mark Palajak from the Sunset East area, and this is not about the downtown development. Zone 7 is developing plans for a flood protection program for the Maderos, Granada, Murrieta reach of the Arroyo Mocho. My understanding is that the Zone 7 has responsibility for the stormwater, for the recharging groundwater in the area, but the city is responsible for the pathway that lies on the north side of the Mocho. I'm sure you're aware that the bike and pedestrian path sustained substantial damage during the last season, and the underpass under Holmes is still blocked, and it has been for a year now. I was speaking with the project manager for Zone 7, and Zone 7 doesn't have any plans for doing anything for the underpass to either protect it from a severe rainy year or to enable it to be restored to service with minimal effort. Also, Zone 7 is not aware that the active transportation plan shows a new path on the south side of the Mocho Trail between Holmes and Arroyo. I think the city of Livermore should be very interested in influencing Zone 7's plan because of the impact it'll have on the people that use it and the maintenance of that path. And I think some of the directors of Zone 7 recognize that too. In their January 17 meeting, Director Sarah Palmer commented that the path is a highly used recreational area, and who oversees the bike path. And she was told by staff that that's a responsibility of the city of Livermore, and that the Zone 7 takes care of the other access roads and the like. So I'm here just to suggest to the City Council to suggest that I would encourage you to have staff involved in the planning process, because I think it directly affects a lot of the citizens in Fremont. And the Zone 7 will be looking after the interests from a flood control perspective, but not from a recreational or other utilitarian uses of the Mocho Trail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm sure that staff is taking notes and will be in touch. Thank you very much for your comments. Carl Wente, Rick Nordyke, Evan Branning. Mr. Wente.
How are you all?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Thank you again for what you do, your continual efforts on the betterment downtown. Staff, everybody, thank you for what you do. It's much appreciated. The lies that are coming out, right? Mr. Kent alluded to a lot of things, and there's been reporting and there's been things going on, and I'm still just imploring everybody for a higher standard, a higher code of conduct. Been doing a lot of studying on it. Field lies to guides and statistics, right? There's 3 types of lies. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. One of the quotes I loved out of this: the blackest lie is a partial truth that leads you to a wrong conclusion, right? That's willfully trying to get someone to the wrong conclusion. This really a similar quote: a lie which is a half-truth is ever the blackest of lies, right? Trying to lead that in with those little semblances of truth. The last one I like the best, it ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Right? And then so I just implore us all to be aware of the stuff that's coming out. How many people go to the cartoon and like spot the differences? You know what I'm talking about? I mean, this stuff, it has to pass. We all know page 5 that went out there. The intersection test, the right turn lane test that comes in here, the fire department that has to get themselves through. My name's Carl Wente. I speak for myself. I speak for no one else. Just to be clear, I'm not even a resident of Livermore. I live just outside the county line. Don't say that I'm not of Livermore. My family's not of Livermore. First generation here, 1883, helped set up the hospital, helped set up the Bank of Italy, helped set up the high schools, helped set up the funding. I am very much of Livermore, but not a citizen. But as a citizen, I implore us to hold ourselves to a higher standard of what comes out. All of this stuff that's coming out, it has to pass the test. I mean, that's a dancing horse. How often y'all get on dancing horses, right? I mean, we want to celebrate our veterans, we want to celebrate, and all of this stuff that's coming through is to lead a false narrative. And this false narrative is what's making me mad. Remember last time I want to talk about the divine comedy, and I stayed out of purgatory. But you go into purgatory, you go to the noble pagan: lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, and then you get to deceit and fraud. Those that are counselors of fraud narrate a false tale to deceive. They're falsifiers, a quote disease. This is Dante, not me. A disease on society. They're perjurers, falsifiers of word, and sowers of discord. And then you go down, you get Judas, Cassius, and Brutus, and Lucifer, and the big D himself in case and I. So one step above are those people that willfully deceive their fellow citizens. Please, please stop. You've been asked. We know who's being talked about right here, right now. Please stop for the betterment of Livermore. We are all of Livermore, of this place, of this town. I can go on, and I plan to in the future, of the falseness that's coming through. Gene, I went through the book of Friends of Livermore, and you haven't gone unsigned it in between to file for 14 years, 10 years. I only got to year 10, and I was filing through. Look at all the filings. We know where the money's come from. We know how it's flowing. There is an inherent conflict of interest, and the citizens must come together to say, we've had it. We don't like it. You don't represent the majority. Don't claim that you represent the majority. We are of Livermore for the benefit of Livermore, the betterment of Livermore. Thank you for what you do. Thank the 5 of you for what you do. Let's be better, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wente. Rick Nordyke, Evan Branning, Asa Strout.
Tough act to follow. The Independent gets a lot of letters, gets a lot of long letters to the paper, but I thought recently the shortest letter said it best, nailed it. Tom O'Neill. We've been trumped. And I agree. I feel like the opaqueness of the Trump administration, I'm feeling the same issues that I'm feeling about what happened here with the downtown. All the things aren't coming out. I know there's a loan involved, but I just don't feel like the council has been forthcoming with information as far as to explain why, when there's obviously such a majority express their desires to go otherwise, that you voted the way you did. And it's right now it's the elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Nordyke. Evan Branning, Asa Strout, Dave Finster.
Good evening. My name is Evan Branning, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself today. I want to start, actually, I do have something I wanted to say on the comments, but I have a brief comment about item 6.2, and I don't want to be up here speaking twice. So I just want to say that there are some people who are going to be speaking on 6.2, and this is an issue that touches people's lives directly. It is about housing and about how it will displace them. So I do hope you will take their comments very seriously and listen to the concerns that they have. With that, the reason I came here today was actually to speak about the downtown plan. I have talked to many people, and this has been the most transparent process I have ever seen on any city plan, including my life in LA, my time in San Jose, my time here, my time in other cities as well. I've never seen a process where there has been so much input from the citizens and so much discussion over this plan. I was told a story once that if as city council you chose 5 people and with each one you pleased each one time, that means you pissed off 4 people 5 times. We can't come to a decision where one person is pleased, where one person wins every time. We all need to compromise. And that's what this plan has done. Right now, behind me, there are some who will be speaking about the problems with the plan. There are people who will be speaking out against it. And the truth is, these are people who have a vested interest in this plan. It is people who are looking at putting a parking garage next to a building that they own, using a PAC that they disassociate with to benefit a theater that has the same leadership as the PAC that they're on. These are people who want to spend as much money on this parking garage as all of the rest of the project will cost, simply so that they do not have to cross a street to get to the theater on a Sunday night. The project builds more parking as is than is necessary. It builds housing, it builds open space, it gives us a place to gather, it puts a hotel where our friends and family will be able to stay. It builds a community in which we can all be proud. We should all be coming together on this. It is sad to me that the Independent magazine is publishing ads and articles that tear down the process when there has never been a process this open. There has never been this much input. There have never been so many voices heard. We all got something to be proud of. None of us got everything we wanted, but we all should be looking at this as the future of Livermore with pride, with respect, coming together, an open dialogue, and seeing this all built now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Branning. Asa Strout, Dave Finster, Greg Scott.
Hi, I'm Asa Strout, Livermore resident. I'm here talking in support of our current downtown plan, and I'm urging the city to move past the excess noise that has come up within the last couple of weeks. At this point of the stage, any change, even the smallest change, will delay this plan months, while the largest change, like relocating everything per a flyer that was advertised recently, can delay this thing years. Simply moving housing off the property onto a different plot of land, even if adjacent, opens Livermore up to lawsuits. It opens Livermore up to paying, the council had mentioned last meeting, $5 million. Maybe I need some clarification. I don't even know if that's the right number. Do we know if the state is going to charge us interest or charge us today's value of the property? I'm not 100% sure, but that could be even more than $5 million. It could be even more than the 14.5 that we started with. Well, at this point of the stage, we just need to move forward, and I'm urging the city council to continue to push forward, because I don't want to see the dirt lot there when my daughter is 10 years old and she just turned 1 Saturday. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Strout. Dave Finster, Greg Scott, Lisa Tromovich.
Mr. Mayor and Council, on behalf of the Livermore Stockmen's Rodeo Association, we'd like to thank you again for your vote on January 29th for Stockman's Park. We'd also like to thank the community and all the community groups for all the support in coming together in support of this park and the downtown. No matter how you guys vote, you're not going to make everybody happy. Hence some of the bad press that you've been getting in the Independent. But I'd just like to let you know that most of the community is behind you and are very excited about finally getting our downtown started. We've seen some other plans in papers that have Stockman's Park in it. We are not negotiating with anybody else. We have a done deal with the city, and that is the way that we are going to keep it. So in closing, thank you again for a job well done.
Thank you, Mr. Finster. Greg Scott, Lisa Tromovich, Patricia Monroe.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Marchand, Livermore City Council, and City of Livermore staff. I am Greg Scott. At this place and time, I give honor and respect to the men and women who were part of the Vietnam War effort. Early this month was the 50th anniversary of the Tet Offensive, some of the heaviest fighting of the Vietnam War. The U.S. military lost no battle, though Khe Sanh was overrun during the Tet Offensive, but was taken at considerable cost. Over 58,000 American lives were lost in the Vietnam War. My brother was there for the Tet Offensive. Fortunately, he returned alive to the States. He was one of 2 out of 32 in his platoon that returned alive and intact. On my brother's last tour in 1970, his unit ambushed and killed 3 of the enemy. A short time later, at some distance away, his commanding officer called him in. The commanding officer was aghast at the blood of the killed on my brother's uniform and asked, "What have you been doing?" My brother responded, "Fighting a war, sir." That was the end of the war for my brother. In 72 hours, he was flying into San Diego, listening to Simon & Garfunkel's The Sounds of Silence over the headphones. My brother returned to a mostly ungrateful nation with 2 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Stars. In 50 years, this nation remains still mostly ungrateful. Why should any veteran who served their country be homeless and or unemployed? This country has the audacity to issue H-2B temporary visas when even one veteran desires shelter and or a job. Why should there be homeless veterans in Livermore? I know one homeless veteran woman who has been living in her car for over 5 years. Why should any woman, for that matter, go unsheltered who does not wish to? We are a patriarchy. This must change. but it is the current reality. As men, can't we at least get homeless women who desire shelter off the streets and or out of the arroyos of Livermore? Would we be okay with our mothers out there unsheltered? Would we be okay as men with our daughters out there unsheltered? Would we be okay with the love of our life out there unsheltered? There is no solution to homelessness without morals and ethics with political will.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. If I could just make a brief comment. You're good where you are. I was fortunate to have been part of the National Mayor's Challenge to End Veteran Homelessness and was part of the collaboration with Michelle Obama at the White House. And President Obama reduced the amount of veteran homelessness by 50% in this country. And Livermore was the only city in the Tri-Valley that signed on to that pact with the White House. So this is something that we are committed to work on and committed to solve. It's a large problem. I've spoken with the Secretary of the VA on a number of occasions, and we are working to solve this. I was back at the conference and spoke to the VA again 2 weeks ago. And it's something that we are continue to work with the federal government to solve, and I certainly appreciate your passion on that. So thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Tromovich, Patricia Monroe, Dave McGuigan.
Hi, thank you. I was here on the last Monday meeting, but I was unable to attend on Tuesday. And I just have to tell you the excitement that came out of the city and the staff moving forward. It was amazing. For days, I was bumping into people, and everyone was talking about how excited they were that everything was moving forward. So pleased with the beautiful plans that, as previous speakers have said, not everybody didn't get everything they wanted, and that's not possible when you're working together as a community to solve various problems and meet various needs. But I think that every single group that was represented, and certainly the many voices I heard, all have multiple things in the plan that they can point to and say, wow, I was heard. And I was one of the people that was gathering signatures, and of those over 800 people who signed on to the Stockman Park portion of it, and all very, very excited. So thank you. It's been great work. It was a very open and transparent process, and it really made me feel more involved in my community and more involved in the workings of the city as a city. So I'm starting to go to other meetings and learn about other aspects of the community that need attention and maybe need some community support. So I think we're going to have a beautiful downtown. We're supporting our site-specific plan. We're doing what we said we were going to do over the various decades. We're actually getting moving. And I think we're waking up the community to opportunities to become involved. So thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, City Council. Good work. It's been going great.
Thank you, Ms. Tromovich. Patricia Monroe, Dave McGuigan, John Stein.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand, City Council members, and City staff. I am not here to speak about downtown, except that I do want to thank you for your efforts and just say how truly delighted I am with the plan that you have approved. Yesterday, I saw Mayor Marchand and Councilmember Werner at the Rally for Love. And following up on that goal of inspiring civil discourse and harmony, I'm here to invite you, all of you, and everybody back there, and everyone there, to Looking for Our America, a program of respectful conversations between people of different ages and cultures, religions and ethnicities, political views and incomes. I'd like you to join me as we build understanding and community. It's no secret that the country's divided still over what it means to be an American. Tri-Valley's no exception. The differences are between real people with real stories. They're not abstract states and parties, and at their heart, they're about who we are, what we believe, and how we make our communities and our country better for all of us. That strength, I believe, is in our differences. We don't have to agree with each other to hear each other. And I believe we can heal some of our divisions by telling those stories and listening to others, and then acting together. So, here's the program. It's called Looking for Our America, a Conversation, It takes place Mondays, I'm really sorry, 7 to 8:30 p.m. It takes place February 26th, March 5th, March 12th, and March 19th at the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. And the questions that we'll be looking at over those 4 weeks are, how do you define an American? What American values and traditions make you most proud? What should our government do for us, and what should we do for America? And how can we make a difference in our community? I have flyers and postcards, if you'd like them. Yes, sure. And I'll be here for questions, or you can pick up flyers and postcards from me. Sign up, please. We'd like to know who's coming, because there will be food. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Monroe. Dave McGuigan, John Stein, Jeff Caskey, and Don Argula.
Mayor Marchand, since you felt the need to interrupt me again the last time and claim it was utterly false that you interfered in the trial of ex-officer Black, let me ask you something. Now, you used public monies to hire an outside lawyer to make a motion in the trial, so you really can't say that you stayed on the sidelines. And the motion was to suppress evidence that the DA wanted to introduce, so you really can't say you were facilitating the prosecution. No, you injected yourself in a criminal trial in which you were not the defendant and acted in direct opposition to the prosecution. Now, interfering seems pretty appropriate, but what term would you suggest? It's actually pretty stupid to try and deny it. We may not know why you committed the morally repugnant act of interfering in the trial of a sexual predator, but it's no secret that you did. Now let's consider the complaints raised against ex-officer Black. First, there was the child custody dispute. That could be an indication he was trying to dominate his ex-wife in conflict with a court order. Then there was a filming of someone while having sex without their consent. And when you do something without consent, that's a crime of domination. Then there's the sex with someone under the end of the influence, so they couldn't consent. Another crime of domination. And then came the suspected child abuse report. By definition, a crime of domination. So now how does a trained professional who takes their responsibility seriously for maintaining the integrity of the Livermore Police Department look at this pattern and say, this is the kind of man we want on the streets of Livermore in uniform? Of course, it was only a few months later that ex-officer Black exploited a teenage girl whose home life as a daughter of an Oakland police sergeant led her to enter the early career of underage prostitution. Now, to be clear, she was over 18 before ex-officer Black got his claws into her. But when he says, I'll buy you dinner, but I'm not going to pay you, he's committing another crime of domination while exploiting her. It's not like there wasn't plenty of warning. That brings us up to the real question. Why does Chief Michael Harris still have a job? At best, his handling of the complaints against ex-officer Black was gross negligence that resulted in the exploitation of a teenage girl. At worst, a possible criminal conspiracy to conceal the crimes committed by the Livermore police. And given how much he lied in covering up my complaint against Officer Starr, the latter explanation is much more likely. The mayor and the police chief are given a lot of power in society. You can tell the character of a man by how he uses that power. Our chief uses his power to cover up the crimes committed by the Livermore police, keeping sexual predators on the street and in uniform. Our mayor uses his power to interfere in the trials when the officers are finally caught. You two sick puppies do belong together, just not working in public service.
John Stein, Jeff Caskey, Don Argula.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. First, in regard to the downtown, we have a plan now. I don't think you would want to go back through it. I don't think the city would want to spend another $500,000, and I don't think the community has the stomach to do it. So it's not a perfect plan. I have, points that I like and points that I dislike, as I'm sure most of the community does. But it sort of upsets me that people tend to view a compromise as a defeat rather than a victory. And I would urge that the plan proceed. It's better than the '84 plan, which gave us Lucky. It's better than the plan that had 500 units of housing to support a regional theater. It's better than the Lennar plan. And a good plan today is always better than a perfect plan sometime in the future. The reason I came up here was to talk about the Bay Area plan. It started in 2004. It's supposed to be finished in 2040, and they had 12 major goals. And implementation is well along. It's time for some evaluation. The first goal was to reduce per capita CO2 production, and that has come about primarily due to technological advances, lighter cars, more hybrids, more efficiency, but the number of miles traveled and the number of cars on the road continues to increase. The second one was adequate housing. You just had a talk about homelessness. The price of housing is growing at about twice the growth of wages. People are moving out of the Bay Area. 40% of the population says they're thinking about leaving the Bay Area for a place where housing is affordable. Something like 30% of the population spends more than 50% of their after-tax income on housing. And it's going to become even more difficult with limitations on deductions for state and local taxes and interest paid on mortgages. The next one is reduce adverse health impacts associated with air quality, road safety, and physical inactivity. Those are sort of a push. They're locating a lot of people in areas with high noise levels and high levels of pollution. But overall, some people are moving out into the Central Valley, which also has poor air quality. But overall, it's about a push. The fourth one is direct all non-agricultural development within the urban footprint. And that has been true for the Bay Area, but what's happened is tens of thousands of acres in the Central Valley and Salinas Valley and Sonoma, prime agricultural land, is being covered by houses. I'm up to 4 out of 12, so I'll see you next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Jeff Caskey, down Argula.
Good evening. Wow, the downtown plan has created an evening of public character assassination. I'm wondering what these people are so scared of. It's true, I have a vested interest. I live here. Why are people so angry about the downtown plan? Maybe it's Carl Wente's half-truths. I think he may be correct. The city newsletter says the plan, quote, responds to the priorities identified by the community through an extensive public engagement process. What it doesn't say is that the priority ranking was a minor activity. Most of the activity time, whether you were online or in person, was spent crafting sketches of downtown where the participants could show how they felt the elements should fit together. Additionally, participants had the opportunity to enter comments, where they were free to talk about the plan and how they wanted to see it come together. The city newsletter never mentions either the drawing activities or the comments, and we have to assume that it's because both results were heavily in favor of a broad park across the west side and a west side hotel to activate that space. Likewise, in Council's final discussion of the hotel location, the developer's desires and success of the hotel were mentioned many times, but not these results of the public outreach. In truth, any upscale hotel in downtown Livermore has a great chance to be successful, regardless of where it goes. The question is, what do the residents of Livermore get from it, given that they'll be contributing $10 to $20 million to the hotel project? Is it too much to ask that the hotel contribute as best it can to the downtown space? It isn't clear why the fix is in for the East Side Hotel, but the council made no particular secret of it. The consultant first noted that while the hotel location was not unanimously agreed, the majority wanted it on the west side. That's just a statement of fact. When the same data was summarized again in the January meeting, it was restated as simply a divided opinion. No preference indicated. That's one of Carl's half-truths. In addition, it's now clear from the statements by the Stockman that the negotiations with the city have been going on for over a year, meaning that the city, and I assume some of our council, knew that the Stockman's plan was in the works well before the steering committee began and certainly before the public outreach process. Yet none of those details were given to the steering committee and none was discussed at the outreach meetings. The Stockman have given us a wonderful opportunity. I was fortunate to sit at a dinner table with a Stockman member and a member of the Interfaith Housing Group. The Stockman leaned over to the Interfaith Housing member and said, "Hey, let us know anything you need." I think they're doing an amazing project, and I'm really excited to see the work that they're doing together. Both groups are really stepping up. I'd like to see the council do likewise. I'd like to also defend the community group. You have this chance at a downtown plan with the Stockman's Park, with open space, because the community group, along with others, opposed the Lennar plan, advocated by many of the folks now cheering this new plan. Apparently, advocacy is only bad when you disagree with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caskey. Don Argula.
Good evening. Dawn Argula, CEO and President of the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm here to reiterate the Chamber's support for the actions taken by all of you that moved forward a plan for the next phase of the downtown district revitalization. We recognize the extraordinary efforts of the entire council, city staff, and the community, including local businesses and organizations, to produce a plan that is responsive to the needs and desires expressed through a comprehensive public process and one which is financially responsible. The city has conducted its due diligence in vetting a large range of possible options. It consulted with experts in the field for the major elements: parking and traffic, hotel, retail, commercial, housing, and green public spaces. And still, the city managed to include or address these elements in the plan adopted last month. All the boxes were checked. Many compromises have been made, and certainly there will be a degree of dissatisfaction, especially by some that had no expertise in any aspect of urban or suburban land use design, planning, or finance, but still willingly led you hither and yon at taxpayer expense to evaluate a preferred location, amenity, or any of the above. I admire the stamina and patience of the staff as they thoroughly conducted the evaluations. I can appreciate the fact that this due diligence was needed to address whatever future grievances may arise, avoid further delay, and we've been waiting over 10 years, and to ensure that we had an actionable plan that could be executed very soon. The Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce and I, as a longtime Livermore resident, agree that you managed to adopt an excellent plan that is reasonable, responsible, and that respects not only the early blueprint of the city's downtown specific plan, but a plan that also respects residences, businesses, and visitors today, as well as those that will come in the future. The completion of this wonderful plan will be a legacy that will remain long after you leave office or retire. I have a few more seconds, so just a few other comments. It's disappointing to me personally, and I understand that there are residents that oppose housing, especially in the downtown district. I remind you that a significant amount of housing is in the downtown specific plan, but due to the Stockman's proposal, instead of 200 plus units, only 130 are planned. This is a compromise. Also, do not surround the city's Bankhead Theater with yet another parking garage or on a very prominent piece of prime downtown real estate. And for heaven's sake, do not put cars before people by building a garage in a location designated for housing or a hotel. I remind you that all the surface parking on these parcels were always intended to be temporary. You have met your commitment for replacement parking in this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Argula. A couple of questions, if I may. A couple of the speakers brought up a comment that the city was contributing $10 to $20 million to the hotel. Is that the case?
At this point, you are in an exclusive negotiating rights agreement with the hotelier. Those items will ultimately return to the council for your final approval. At this point, we do not anticipate any subsidies of that scale on this. The plan will ultimately have public financing from the perspective of a community facilities district, but that actually is paid for by the actual owner of the property. So while some facilities will be built in the downtown related to the hotel, those will ultimately be paid for by the hotel.
By the hotel. Okay, thank you. Also, there's also some comment about the public input process, and as I understand, we had over 2,000 people participate, and far and away, as we've heard a number of occasions, that the preferred location for the hotel entrance was somewhere on South Livermore Avenue. Now, there was some discussion on the west or east side of South Livermore, but that was the primary focus, is most people wanted it on South Livermore. Is that correct?
Most of the drawings did include a connection to the hotel. The majority were on the west, but the vast majority were either adjacent to or had some connection to South Livermore Avenue on the east or the west.
Was there any significant support for a hotel on Railroad Avenue during the 6 to 8 months of public outreach?
The hotel, essentially with a connection to South Livermore Avenue, some of the drawings did have the hotel near Railroad Avenue, but the frontage essentially was on South Livermore.
But there was no frontage on, no significant support for an entrance on Railroad.
The hotel drawings basically showed the hotel in that location, but our understanding as staff was that the hotel front door, as it were, would be on South Livermore Avenue.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Vice Mayor?
Having been heavily involved in the deal with the Stockman, I frankly do not appreciate this unfounded insinuation and allegation. So I'd like to ask staff, was there a Stockman's deal in the works with respect to moving the park before the steering committee started?
No.
Was the Stockman's deal announced before the outreach officially started?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
It was August 14th, so it was. And in fact,
excuse me.
I did it, and I'll tell you this. I got a call from the reporter at the Independent saying, how can you do that? Don't you? And I specifically answered that when we have something as significant as this, it's incumbent upon us to make it known immediately. So I was asked actually by the Independent not to put it out there. And I said, you know that if I don't, you will rip me for not doing it afterwards. And they said, yeah. So I just want to tell you what's going on here. And I really don't appreciate the kind of insinuation that was just made.
Any additional comments, questions? Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar. These are typically routine items which are acted upon with usually a single motion. However, we do have a speaker card on 4.07. What I would like to do is, can I have a motion for 4.01 to 4.06?
I'll move we accept 4.01 through 4.06.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Carling, seconded by Vice Mayor Warner. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Okay, on to 4.07. This is the resolution regarding the below market rates and the housing on Locomotive Lane. Mr. Bradley.
Hello again. The builder of that complex was required to set this unit aside as affordable housing. Subsequent to purchase, this organization was able to purchase this property with the assistance of city funds, and now they're crying that times are tough. They're blaming they would have made a lot more money but it's the housing authority's fault. They didn't get Section 8. And I don't think they should be rewarded. They have a loan that they haven't made payments on, and part of the new loan is to loan them the interest that they should already have paid. I am a property manager in Livermore. I do rentals all the time. I was a housing commissioner for 8 years. Chair of the Housing Authority here for 4 years. If they can't make money at full market rate, doesn't mean they can't make money. They can, they just can't make as much as if they could get a full market rate for affordable unit. And instead of loaning them the money for a sweetheart loan of 55 years at 3%, you should declare their loan in default because they owe interest already, which they haven't paid, apparently. Do a foreclosure sale on the note And you could use the money, well, you use a credit bid for that, use the money you were going to loan to them, and you could purchase the property outright and not have to worry about it. It could be operated for affordable housing forever, if that's what you desired. But this deal does not look like a good deal to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. And stepping up, I see we have Mr. Uranga. Do you wish to provide comments?
Sure. With your permission, I'd like to clarify some of the statements that were made and give you a little history on this unit. In addition, we have the Executive Director of Housing Consortium for the East Bay here to answer any additional questions. Station Square, when it was developed, had a 10% inclusionary requirement, and it satisfied that. This unit was in addition to that requirement. It was a unit that was set aside for special user housing, the folks who reside in there. They pay rent of about $300 a month, and $300 a month, because of the nature of the disability, they were only able to afford about $300 a month, and that barely covers, and probably doesn't even cover operating expenses. The original intent was to city to provide them a loan that was had deferred interest. The interest would not be paid, which is typical of city housing loans. So the accumulated interest is they're not behind in their payments. This is accrued interest. What the original intent was for the housing authority to provide a Section 8 voucher that will allow those units to remain at that low rent level and cover operating expenses. But the housing authority wasn't able to, for various reasons, wasn't able to fulfill that commitment. And so for several years now, the organization has made up that difference between and to keep the rents at extremely low income levels. Seen and through our monitoring, we've seen that they had this negative cash flow for a number of years. It's a small nonprofit. It's a very capable nonprofit, but typically in this case, the city to cure it, the city can provide additional equity that and take out some of the loan to allow the project to remain financially healthy without it being a burden on the nonprofit organization that has stepped up and provided this very much needed housing that's out there. So this is does not indicate any lack of capability on the organization's part. It was just the way it went with a commitment that was there that wasn't fulfilled, and it helps us provide some extremely affordable units to folks who are very much in need of it.
Okay. Thank you for the additional comments. Councilmember Carling.
Thanks, Mr. Harenka, but I do have another question that's related to what Mr. Bradley said, is why didn't they, during the course of the period of time where they were supposed to be financially, why didn't they pay it back? I thought that right, I mean, we're loaning them more money because for some reason they weren't able to secure the Section 8 financing or something like that, right?
That is correct. And what
why is it taking them so long, I guess, is the...
Because they didn't want to ask us, I guess. I think the nonprofit, the executive director here could give us some insight on why they were willing to take a negative cash flow for that years without asking the city for assistance. Maybe they should have, but the idea now is that they have that negative flow, and we're stepping in to correct it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Vice Mayor,
I'd like to ask a question. I think I'd like to ask Mr. Roberts to comment on this as well, because you read this, and I was going to pull this thing for discussion anyway if it hadn't been a speaker card, but it kind of begs the question, what happened? Really, what happened? And are we vulnerable to this kind of thing happening in the future, or are we taking steps to kind of fix this? And if you could comment, I'd appreciate it.
So as you know, the Housing Authority basically reports to an appointed board. One of the issues had to do with their inability to actually accomplish the vouchers necessary in this case. Once the city was made aware of that situation, we basically had our staff work with Housing Authority staff to deal with that issue. Because the issue really is one of the Housing Authority being able to effectively and efficiently make sure that the vouchers ultimately are available when they need to be for projects like this. So as soon as we basically at the city were notified that that was an issue, our staff has been working with the Housing Authority staff, and that's actually why we believe that the vouchers will come online here shortly. So it's not just hope. We actually have some data behind that, and our staff has been working with theirs, so that is a very likely outcome in this process. So while we do ultimately need to address the cash flow issue that happened over the last several years, going forward, both for this project and others, we're very confident that we can utilize the processes outlined in the staff report.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Okay. Is there a motion?
Oh, I'll also move.
Okay. Staff recommendation on the item? Okay.
On 4.07.
Okay. Motion by Vice Mayor Warner.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Coomber. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We have no public hearings. Moving on to matters for consideration. This is a discussion and direction and agreement regarding the Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation in the City of Livermore on Chestnut. Strange little series of parcels, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have Fran Reisner, Bob Vinn.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight for your consideration is the acquisition of property located on North End Street from the Mario Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation. As you are aware, the city is working with Mid-Penn Housing on the development of Chestnut Square, which is located at Chestnut and P Street in Livermore. In addition to the affordable senior and family housing components to be developed by Mid-Penn, there's a 44-unit townhouse project which Warmington Homes is currently in agreement with Mid-Penn to purchase and develop. City staff has been working with Mid-Penn and Warmington to transfer the townhome parcel according to the city's development agreement and tentative map approved for that project. Through the due diligence process, it was determined that underlying ownership of 5 parcels needs to be cleaned up and transferred to the city. Most of the parcels, as you can see on the pictured in red outlined area, fall within the North End Street right-of-way. Most of the areas will remain as part of the street, and a portion is needed for landscaping and sound attenuation for the future townhome project. As you can see here, there's an overview of North End Street. As you know, the 217 North End Street property is owned by the city and was acquired from O'Brien Homes in 2011. The underlying ownership of the property in the street right-of-way was not transferred from the original owner, the estate of Mario Pedrozzi, when it was sold to O'Brien. These properties are now owned by the Mario Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation and should be transferred to the city to clean up title. In addition, 2 parcels at the southern end of the street, so we're like down here, and contiguous with the city's property line have unclear ownership status due to various street alignments over the long history of that area. And then finally, Union Pacific Railroad is the underlying property owner of a portion of the street that is needed in order to complete the desired sound wall and landscaping plans for the project in this area right here. So to resolve these ownership and access matters for your approval tonight is the agreement to convey real property between the Mario Pedrozzi Scholarship Foundation and the city. This agreement outlines the proposed transfers and easement needed for the Chestnut Square project. First, the foundation will undergo a quiet title process to acquire clear title to the 2 unknown parcels. The quiet title is a legal action that will be filed by the foundation in order to establish their ownership rights as the previous and most rightful owner of the parcels. Then the foundation will transfer title to all of the parcels, which are indicated here on the slide shown in green, to the city. This is approximately 0.4 acres total. The foundation will also acquire an easement for landscaping and sound wall construction from Union Pacific Railroad to be dedicated to the future developer owner of the townhouse project in this area right here. In accordance with the government code, any real property acquired by the city must be reported to the Planning Commission for a determination of consistency with the city's general plan, and the PC made that determination in January. So the Mario Pedrosi Scholarship Foundation serves to reduce the financial and information barriers to higher education for all Livermore students. And so the foundation has a vested interest in participating in the long-term success and to leverage the community impact of the Chestnut Family Project. As consideration for the foundation's efforts to work with the parties to resolve these issues, Mid-Penn agreed to name the interior lane within the project after Mr. Mario Pedrosi, who had a personal connection to the site, and to provide access to the foundations for the use of the future community space so that the foundation can provide the benefit of its services to the low-income residents and surrounding neighborhood. And the agreement also includes funds to cover legal costs incurred by the foundation. So staff recommends approval of the acquisition of the 5 parcels from the foundation, approval to execute the agreement to convey real property, and an appropriation of $80,000 in housing trust funds, which will pay for legal and property transfer costs, which are described in the agreement, along with additional funds for associated transfer and escrow costs that will be incurred by the city to complete the process. So if you have any questions, staff is available to answer this time.
Thank you. Questions?
What does it say, 80,000 on one slide and 70 on the other?
It's $70,000 in the agreement with the Pedrosi Foundation, and there's an additional $10,000 we're requesting to cover additional costs that would be incurred by the city, just as some additional funds.
Thanks.
Sharp eye. Any other questions for staff? Okay. I have 2 comment cards. Carolyn Siegfried, Executive Director of the Pedrosi Foundation, and John Stein. Good evening.
Good evening. Dear Mayor Marchand and City Council members, speaking for myself and on behalf of the Pedrosi Foundation Board of Directors, we are proud to partner with the city and Mid-Penn Housing on the Chestnut Street project, a needed affordable housing development in our community. Mario Pedrosi, a Livermore resident, businessman, and city council member, left his estate to establish the Mario Pedrosi Scholarship Foundation. Following Mr. Pedrosi's death, his estate, the majority of which was real estate, was liquidated, and all involved believed indeed all assets were liquidated. Since 2008, the foundation has awarded $3.6 million to 1,000 Livermore graduates to help create a college and career-bound culture. In addition to awarding scholarships, we promote financial aid awareness and host workshops for students and families to complete complex financial aid applications. We partner with the Livermore School District to fund PSAT testing for all sophomores on a school day. We partner with Las Positas College administrators and staff to increase the success of Pedrosi scholars at Las Positas. We partner with ABC NorCal to offer apprenticeship tool scholarships for Livermore graduates pursuing careers in the building trades. We launched the Young Pedrosi Scholar Program, a pilot program to support and encourage Principal Honor Roll students from Maryland Avenue Elementary School as they progress through middle and high school. As we work to expand the impact of Mario Pedrosi's generous gift, we look for partners. Through this new partnership with the City of Livermore and Mid-Penn Housing, we will have access to a community space to carry out our work. We look forward to supporting students living in Chestnut Square and the surrounding neighborhoods. We are proud that Mario Pedrosi's legacy is being memorialized by the naming of the main street within Chestnut Square, Pedrosi Common. What a wonderful way for our community to recognize a man whose generosity positively impacts thousands of Livermore students. The Pedrosi Foundation looks forward to its continuous and strong partnership with the City of Livermore and Mid-Penn Housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Siegfried, and keep up the great work at the foundation.
Thank you.
John Stein.
John Stein, 1334 Cathy Court. I support the staff recommendation and, of course, the Pedrosi Foundation. I had a question, though. Some of the buildings, particularly on the east side, look awfully close to the boundary. At your last meeting, you said there was a 75-foot setback in the redevelopment agency from the boundary. I was wondering if it meets that, or if the additional land will allow the buildings to be moved further away from the boundary. I noticed, for example, Station Square and Brighton seem to be awfully close to the railroad tracks, and the railroad crossings where the horns are sounded, 150 dB air horns. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question for Mr. Stein's question, or an answer for Mr. Stein's question?
Sure. So the downtown specific plan requires that a noise and vibration study be undertaken within 100 feet of the center line of the railroad, which is about 75 feet from the railroad property line. If a property is going to be any closer than that, then the noise and vibration study would need to support that and identify technical improvements to allow that to happen.
Okay, and I understand that Sunol has just been granted a quiet zone, so they'll not be sounding the horns through there, and we can certainly pursue a similar application for that area as well.
We can look into that.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a comment. I think the 75 feet is more for the vibration than the horn, I think, but I'm not sure. The other thing, I would just like to thank the Pedrosi Foundation for making this as easy as it was, because it really could have been painful, and it seems painful with that level of legal fees. So it's really complicated. So really, thank you for making it easy, and it's wonderful what you do. And so that's great, because we wouldn't want something like that to hang this great project up. So I think it's just good. My question is, so we got into this complicated set of parcels and transfers and everything. Do we have any procedures in place to kind of avoid this kind of lack of clarity in the future? Or do we have more of these things that are out there? Because we're going to, over time, going to be trying to consolidate parcels in this area for additional housing. So do we have other things that we got to worry about, and should we start earlier on this, or what's the situation?
So when we are acquiring properties, especially in the downtown, in the oldest part of the community, I think we should expect that. So certainly starting earlier. This is a case, obviously, as you know, that we assembled several different properties with several different backgrounds on this particular piece here. So I think it is a reminder that, especially when we're in the oldest parts of the city, that we're extra diligent on our acquisition on there, because we have from time to time, and other property owners have discovered things such as this, where not all of the property rights are clearly laid out. So I think one of the things we will be doing as we continue to move forward is to make sure that as we're in the acquisition process, we try and identify all those items. As you'll remember, this particular end was dedicated to us, so we didn't actually acquire it in an arm's length transaction. So that's one of the pieces of this particular puzzle, but I think it's a cautionary tale as we move forward in the downtown.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll move approval.
Moved by Councilor Spadovsky.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Carling. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 6.02. This is discussion and direction regarding the disposition of city-owned residential units at Station Square.
Thanks, Mayor and City Council. Tonight for your consideration is the disposition of city-owned residential units located in the Station Square development downtown. In 2008, the city purchased 5 townhouse units from Signature Homes in the Station Square development, which is located at Railroad and L Street. The units were purchased using housing funds at the beginning of the housing market downturn for prices between $485,000 and $517,000. The units have 3 bedrooms, 2 1/2 baths, and are a little over 1,700 square feet. At that time, the housing market was beginning to soften, and the city purchased the homes to expand on the existing ownership programs and establish a workforce housing program that would prioritize and incentivize units for sale to moderate income workers in Livermore who did not live in Livermore. Because the housing market began to decline so rapidly, however, the city was unable to find buyers for the units. Therefore, City Council authorized the units be rented to the moderate income Livermore workforce, being 120% of area median income, for a period of 5 years, and directed staff to reassess the sale of the units after that time. The city did not own any other residential units, and it was not the city's intent to permanently own the units. However, the housing recession prolonged the rental program. When the program converted to rental, the original tenants were offered an option to purchase their units. However, none of those tenants opted to do so, and all have since vacated. And current rents of the property for the existing moderate income tenants are approximately $600 to $800 per month below market rate. Four of the units are occupied by moderate income tenants on month-to-month leases, and 1 unit is currently vacant. Since 2008, the city has paid for property management costs and staff time to oversee the units. There are currently, again, no other residential units owned by the city, only these units at Station Square. Now the housing market has fully recovered to pre-recession levels, and the estimated value of each unit is approximately $650,000. Sale of the units is now feasible and desirable, as it was not the intent of the city to hold the units as rentals indefinitely. The original disposition program for the units was designed in a weakening housing market. The housing market has since rebounded, and the demand is high for an affordable opportunity to own a home in Livermore. Staff recommends City Council approve a new disposition plan for the units that addresses the city's current affordable housing goals and priorities by selling up to 2 units to a nonprofit to be used as permanently affordable special needs housing for disabled residents, and providing homeownership opportunities through the city's affordable homeownership program to moderate income households, including the city's preference target groups of teachers, first responders, and veterans. The proposed disposition plan includes a first option for the 4 existing tenants to purchase the units they occupy prior to making the units available to the city's homeownership program waitlist. Offering the tenants an option to purchase exceeds the city's legal requirements, but addresses the issue of displacement. If approved, tenants could apply to purchase their units at the moderate income affordable sales price of $413,770 and would be screened for eligibility in accordance with the city's established affordable homeownership program guidelines. Tenants who are not interested or able to purchase their units would alternatively be provided with professional relocation services over the next 5 months and would receive approximately $5,600 per household. The proposed disposition plan includes the sale of the vacant unit and up to one additional unit, if available, to the nonprofit housing provider Tri-Valley Reach. This unit would be used as shared housing for residents with developmental disabilities who are able to live independently with the support of Tri-Valley Reach. This organization is the successor of House Inc., and they have owned and operated several shared homes in Livermore and Pleasanton for over 20 years. The estimated sales price to Tri-Valley Reach would be $260,119. This low sales price would keep mortgage costs reasonable and aligned with rents that are affordable for extremely low-income tenants. Finally, the plan directs any remaining available units to be sold to the city's existing moderate-income homeownership program waitlist. The city has over 300 households on the waitlist for 2018. Staff recommends using the city's existing affordable homeownership program guidelines because they have been used to screen hundreds of applicants for first-time home purchase through the city for nearly 20 years. So staff recommends City Council take the following actions: approve the proposed disposition plan for the Station Square units, approve the negotiation of sales agreements with Tri-Valley Reach and any tenants who are eligible to purchase their units, and to direct staff to schedule a final disposition hearing for those units and approval of the sales agreements at the City Council meeting on April 23rd or as soon as possible thereafter. Staff also recommends City Council appropriate $86,350 in housing trust funds to pay for tenant relocation services, the professional consultation services, payments to the tenants, and costs to prepare the units for sale, and authorize the city manager or his designee to execute all agreements needed to initiate the disposition plan. If approved, staff will begin to coordinate with the tenants and Tri-Valley Reach and issue noticing and options to purchase to the tenants. Staff is available to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Reisner. Questions for staff?
Quick
Councilor
question.
Spadovsky.
So, as I understand it from the staff report, and also I think it was in the presentation, they've been on month-to-month leases for how long? Not leases, but
rental agreements.
Yes, there you go. I think I need another tag along. So, how long has it been a month-to-month rent?
Well, it varies from tenant to tenant, but in preparation for this request, once their yearly leases expired, each tenant went on a month-to-month lease.
So were they made aware when they signed the initial lease that the intent was for us to convert them back into affordable housing units? Was that in like a disclosure, or I mean, we stated that the plan was to
It was not disclosed in writing to them. No.
Okay, but so at what point did they know that this was the option, that the rent was going away, the rent option? I mean, has it been 6 months, a couple months?
Probably. Someone became aware in the last 2 to 6 months. Yes.
2 to 6 months.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I've got 2 speaker cards, Angie Marshall and Pat O'Brien. Ms. Marshall.
I had some backup documentation.
Sure, you can hand those to the staff, or you hand them to Ms. Reisner, and she can pass it around to the city clerk. Okay. Okay, great. Got it.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand and council members.
My name is Angie Marshall. I have been employed in the city of Livermore for 13 years in the finance department and was recently promoted to a position at the airport. I love this city. I bought my first home here while married, raised my 2 children here, and get involved in the community. I recently graduated from the Citizens Police Academy this past November, as well as volunteer in city cleanups and school fundraisers. The desire of home ownership has been a goal since my divorce in 2015, but unattainable because of the huge increase in home prices. In order to advance my career in the city and establish the salary necessary to reach my goal, I furthered my education and received my bachelor's degree last year. I want to show my teens that goals are attainable with hard work, which is why I'm here this evening. I am a participant in the City of Livermore Workforce Housing Program. My moderate income qualifies me to pay below market rent of $2,415 per month in one of the 5 Station Square townhomes owned by the city. On tonight's agenda, item 6.02, the Housing Department is asking for your approval to sell these homes and put a disposition plan in place for the current tenants. The staff report requests that the council mirror the city's current first-time homebuyers program requirements in order to purchase. I attended the required first-time homebuyers workshop in hopes to be considered to buy under the program. I was immediately disqualified based on 2 factors: the program's firm definition of a first-time homebuyer and the fact that my 18-year-old did not have a credit score. My son Zachary has a bank account but does not have loans or credit cards, and therefore agencies cannot establish a credit score. Why is this interpreted that he has bad credit? The second caveat is that my name was on the title of a rental property in Missouri. It was purchased during my marriage as an investment for our children. We were advised by attorneys to hold on the sale of all assets until the divorce was final. My divorce was final in 2015, and the rental sold in 2016. Housing's current program only considers those with no title to property within the last 3 years. Under the current first-time homebuyer program, I would be eligible in 2019. Needless to say, I would not be eligible to purchase this unit I live in if council approves to mirror the inflexible first-time homebuyer program. I do qualify in all other regards. I have always paid my rent on time. I have exemplary credit, saved money to put down, a qualified income, and would be willing to reside in the home under the guidelines of the program. I researched how other cities, state, and federal agencies defined a first-time homebuyer in their programs. In my research, I found many agencies mirror the first-time homebuyer as defined by HUD and the FHA. These leading agencies define first-time homebuyer to include a single parent who, while married, owned a home with his or her spouse. Furthermore, there are cities that allow exceptions based on the applicant's circumstances. These cities include San Jose, City of Dublin, Oakland, Alameda, San Francisco, Citrus Heights, Garden Grove, County of Monterey, and others. I'm requesting that instead of mirroring the current first-time homebuyer program, that council make exceptions and define first-time homebuyers similar to that of other cities and government agencies. Doing so would eliminate the need to displace my family and possibly the 3 other tenants. Thank you.
Ms. Marshall, a quick question. The home that you bought that was purchased as an investment in Missouri.
Yes.
Did you ever live in that home?
No.
It was purchased out of state, kind of sight unseen, I presume.
Yes.
And, okay. So, but you never actually lived there.
I never lived there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Pat O'Brien, Mr. O'Brien.
Good evening, Mayor Marchant, members of the council. I'm Pat O'Brien, treasurer of Tri-Valley Reach, and just happy to be here tonight and thank the staff, Francis and Susan Calkins in particular, for the good work in working with us. We've had a 28-year relationship with the city of Livermore in providing housing for special needs adults who can live independently. This is an opportunity to expand the inventory for that group of consumers, which we think is really important here in the Tri-Valley. Other than that, we appreciate all the support through the years of past and this current council, both to our organization and to Sunflower Hill, which is down a different path, but again, seeking to serve the special needs community. Thanks again, and we look forward to concluding this sale when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Going to close the public hearing, public comment period. Questions, comments at this point? It seems that this is really kind of a catch-22 because typically when you think of home ownership, you think that's your home and you bought it and you lived there. But that's not the case here. This was bought as part of a marriage, as an investment, out of state. So as I said, it seems like kind of a catch-22 that she didn't actually live there. And you could say, I guess it was a home ownership joint custody, but joint property. So I'm struggling with that. How hard and fast is this? This is a HUD rule.
Well, actually, a couple things, if I can, Mayor. First of all, the program, our first-time homebuyer program, our programs are not associated with HUD. We do not use federal money for these programs. So, the guidelines and the policies that we've created for our first-time home program was through council action over the last 20 years, and over the last that I've been here, and over those years we've qualified many hundreds of folks. We have a very successful program under these rules, and rejected quite a few for owning real estate, and it's not necessarily, and reasoning being is you own real estate assets. I could own an apartment building, and under any the changes that seem to be proposed, and then go and say, now you have to, because I've lost money on this apartment building, and my rent and my income is low, now I can get a publicly subsidized house. We always see as owning real estate as a disqualification of purchasing real estate under subsidized real estate using public funds. And we've held fast to that rule for many years, and again rejected many applicants that had that. Now, under the case of Ms. Marshall, it is a temporal issue. In 2019, she may not be able to buy this unit, but we have a robust inclusionary housing program, and as you know, all residential developers are required to set aside 15% of the units and make them affordable to first-time home buyers. In 2019, she would be eligible as to apply for that program, and qualify under that. So this doesn't exclude her from ever owning a house through our program if she meets all the other qualifications. It's just a temporal one, and it adheres to the past rules that we've had, that we followed for the last couple of decades.
And it's the consistent application of the rules.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Warner?
So first of all, we made the rules.
Yes.
Okay. So this seems like a special situation, and I'm not sure the rules when they were created contemplated this kind of situation. I mean, I'm kind of along the lines of where the mayor might have been going. Is this? It seems like there should be some more understanding of this situation and some flexibility. But one of the questions I got, I think I heard it said that if this was allowed, then others would also be allowed in this kind of thing, or what? Why are there several people in this situation? Because it seems kind of special.
No,
so,
what we're saying in terms of other people, under our home ownership program, this rule applies across all the applicants that we've received, and it's been probably several thousand applications over the years, and we have rejected folks, under with these. Similar circumstances, owning real estate out of state, owning real estate locally, haven't owned it for less than 3 years. Less than 2 years.
So I got to tell you where I'm at this point is I'd kind of like to think about this a little bit and really understand the nuances of the rules we put in place. And a lot of times these things have unintended consequences, and I'm just not into. I like rules, but I'm also like, let's be a little reasonable here. And I'm not sure we are necessarily. So I don't know where everybody else is here, but I'm just not totally comfortable with where we're at on this.
Yeah, I agree. Could we dispose of 4 of them and not the 5th?
Yes, we can. That is council's decision to do so, to make an exception in this.
While we think about, as per Vice Mayor's point, while we think about the other one?
That is your option, yes.
And can I expand on that? One of the questions that I had, do we have 2 of the units that we have 1 vacant right now?
Yes.
And do we know of 1 other unit where they either will not qualify or they're not interested in moving forward?
We don't know that.
We don't know that.
We have not assessed that. We've not gotten to that point where we were able to assess that. So we don't know if other tenants would or would not qualify.
Okay.
And request a special exception as well.
Do we have the ability to do, I don't know, some kind of an expedited screening just to see if somebody would not be interested in continuing forward? Where I'm going with this is if we can sell the 2 units for Tri-Valley Reach and not hold that up in this process, because I love the idea and I love what they do. It seems like they're ready to move forward with that. If there's some way we can figure out 2 of the units, if there happens to be somebody that either doesn't qualify or is not interested for whatever reason, we get those 2 units out of the way for Tri-Valley Reach, because I'm leaning towards the same conclusion that I think is happening up here. But we really have, I don't want to make knee-jerk reaction changes to any policy that we have that could have unforeseen consequences, although I do see the need to finalize. We can't continue to necessarily rent forever. That wasn't the intent. So, you know, I'm kind of at the needs more information part of this process, but if we were able to identify 1 other unit so Tri-Valley Reach can move forward with their 2 units, I think that would be another thing that I'd be willing to explore.
Okay. Under the request in front of you, it's 1 unit for sure and 2 units if there is a second unit available. If all 4 tenants decide that they want to purchase their unit, Reach would only have 1 unit under that. So so it would still stand.
It's still kind of the same direction, but they were looking for 2 in case 1 didn't purchase.
Maybe in the future,
right,
through attrition.
So we know 1 is an issue right now. So if the other 3, out of the other 3, if that's immediately available.
Couldn't we do the Reach one?
Oh, the Reach
that's
one,
empty
yeah.
now?
The
We
one,
could do
yes,
that
now,
right.
but if we can identify the second one.
Is there any benefit in cost savings if to do 2 versus 1? No, Mr. O'Brien, no.
No, it's fine. We weren't expecting you could do 2 at once anyhow.
No.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so we could move forward with the Reach, the Tri-Valley Reach. I don't want to hold that up, but then, you know, again, I do have questions. If we are looking at changing our housing policies, I don't want to do that through, because I'm a firm believer that if we make an exception for 1, it is now policy.
Yes.
We should treat everyone equally, and I don't know what the impact is.
So with that in mind, staff would recommend that you authorize us to sell the vacant unit at this particular time, to examine the other 4 units and return to you with some options at that point.
And just a little more, maybe, is that I've just read through these rules in the other places. I just want to kind of understand, because there seems to be more latitude and consideration in some of these than we might have at the moment.
We do. Part of the trick there is that's a nationwide program, and some of the other programs in the vicinity do allow more flexibility. Your balancing act as policymakers going forward is we have literally hundreds of folks on some of our waiting lists, and that's, in other words, it's not that we don't want to ultimately provide these. So I think that's why taking a step back on the 4 units, taking a little more comprehensive look, providing you some options, and then we can take a look at that point.
And I'm thinking that, you know, as we go forward, one of the things that I'm personally interested in, I think the rest of the people up here are as well, is that we really do have to think about this affordable housing and the combination of the for rent and the for sale. And I think it's timely to look at these rules, because none of us up here had anything to do with them. And so before we're asked to enforce some of them, I'd really like to understand them and see if they need some kind of updating.
One other clarification. When you stated that in 2019 she would qualify then for the program, would that be qualifying for the program being at the bottom of the list of, what was it, the 300 or so that were waiting? Or is there any mechanism that then that could have priority?
She would be put on the list in order that she get it. She would not be.
So it would be at
She would not be allowed to jump the queue. But that 300 list, we go through it fairly quickly, because it's. And I want to point out, none of the tenants nor anybody who currently on the list has. None of them have been screened in terms of their finances and their ability to get a loan that's sufficient for these units. So, so when we look at all 4 tenants, we will also include that as part of the analysis of whether or not, who could be in it. But you are correct. There would be. She would not. She would be at the end of the queue.
So if I could just say that I don't know that if we look at these rules, we want to look at that kind of circumstance and kind of figure it out, right? It's more of, are we being completely reasonable and flexible? And there's this, we have a special situation that's occurred that allows us to think about it, but I don't want to get too focused on all of that and try and, we can get too complicated in the rules. But I do think we need to look at them a little bit, but not so much that we're trying to tailor anything here.
Yeah, it's very easy to overcomplicate when you get into policies and everything, but I think it's probably time that we revisit that policy to make sure that we're keeping up. I mean, at the bank, we looked at policies every year, and we went over them because laws had changed, circumstances had changed. I think it's time, this may be time that we can look at that and proceed with the single unit right now. Because I keep thinking if regardless that she's going to be placed at the end of the queue, my first thought is that she's already occupying the unit. What does that advance? And on the flip side, I understand absolutely the reason for the queue and the queuing, but if there's anything in there that you could that we could look at that might suit such a thing. I don't think any of us has looked at the policy for
and I actually
length of time. So
I agree with that, and I think this is sufficiently complicated enough. I think we should go through the 221, really understand it.
Well, Councilmember Crawling?
One more question, Fran. I think one of the motivations for doing this is it's costing the city money, and we're not really in the business of managing properties, right? Yes. So what is the financial burden to the city today on a monthly or annual basis? I need a sense a little bit of what it's costing us. Do you have an idea?
Yeah. We hire an outside professional property manager because the city doesn't do property manager, and the costs associated with that, plus the costs associated with repairs and maintenance of the units, as well as when they turn over, the cleanup and the marketing of the unit, and that, and the rents, and just the staff administrative burden as well. It takes a significant portion of one of our staff person, our technician, our admin tech, to oversee and deal with rental units. It's a very time-consuming and expensive process. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me though right now.
Okay. I guess as part of the conversation as we move forward, I think that would help me.
Very good.
Just get a ballpark.
We can include that information when we return.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone want to craft a motion at this point, or does staff have sufficient direction to come back?
We would like a motion this evening, because I heard, maybe I was not hearing correctly, but that you were comfortable disposing of the single vacant unit to Reach at this point, and that you'd like us to return after an analysis of the remaining 4 tenant-occupied units.
Sure.
You want to make that motion?
Yeah, sure. I'll make the motion to dispose of the vacant unit to Tri-Valley Reach, and for staff to bring back further information of the remaining 4 units and our affordable housing program.
Okay. Seconded by Vice Mayor. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it's coming back. thank you for your comments, and Mr. O'Brien, thank you for the great work that you're doing. Okay, we're going to combine 6.03 and 6.04 since they seem pretty closely related.
Very good. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm your City Manager. This evening, we have your Fire Chief here and your Administrative Services Director as well to answer any questions related to these two items. These two items essentially include, first of all, direction regarding approval of the Joint Powers Authority amended and restated agreement. So that's the agreement, or the ground rules, as it were, for the City of Livermore and the City of Pleasanton to work together to ultimately provide fire services. The second item that we're combining here is direction related to a memo of understanding between the two cities, dealing with essentially the pension obligations and employment retirement benefits for personnel. And so as we go through the presentation, hopefully it will become clearer what we're doing on both of those items here. And we'll start off here. Starting in 1996, the cities of Livermore and Pleasanton entered into a joint exercise of powers agreement. And in 2000, that agreement was updated. Okay. The JPA is actually governed by 2 members from Pleasanton and 2 members from Livermore. Hopefully the Livermore members recognize their names up there and would agree with us that they, in fact, are members of the JPA. So that is our mayor and vice mayor who currently serve that function there. The governance of the overall structure ultimately comes through the fire chief, up through the 2 city managers, and then policy decisions are made by the board of the JPA, and virtually all substantive issues dealing with execution or dollars being spent in a budgeting standpoint then are ultimately ratified by the 2 city councils. So, the new document basically is the governance document for the JPA, and it does several important, big, broad things. Most notably, it deals with essentially how we contract for particular services, contracting for personnel, acquiring and holding an equipment and real property, obtaining grant funding. It establishes the methodology and the guides to how we allocate the costs, as you might imagine when you have 2 parent cities and an agency serving both. How you divide up the costs is an important feature. That is actually included in there in your JPA, giving the framework of how that's done. It provides that LPFD can and shall secure its own insurance, and that actually helps quite a bit, as you might imagine, with personnel being employed currently by the City of Pleasanton, and actually then trucks and assets being owned by both of the cities, real estate being owned by both of the cities, and then responding to incidents in both of the cities. It can get a bit confusing on how you sort of insure those issues. By having the JPA itself be able to hold that insurance, it simplifies that dramatically. It permits the cities to explicitly provide employees to LPFD, and they provide it in a number of ways. The most direct way is the City of Pleasanton employs all of the people we think of as direct employees of LPFD. That decision was made at the time the JPA was created, and that decision was made because at that particular moment in time, the cost structure of how we brought the employees together, and especially with PERS costs, was lower with Pleasanton. So that's why the employees of LPFD are currently employees of Pleasanton. It also provides that each of the 2 cities contribute employees or portions of employees or functions. For example, administrative services, legal, HR, all of those functions are contributed by the 2 parent cities, and then ultimately the costs for that are distributed among those 2 cities, so that LPFD doesn't have to have its own, for example, finance director or HR director or legal staff. And that was ultimately part of the structure to leverage both of the cities' assets on this. And finally, it establishes procedures for the allocation of equipment, personnel, liabilities should LPFD be dissolved. One of the other things it does is it allows the LPFD to own things. So, for example, when we want to actually only have one of something, now LPFD will be able to do that. Before, it actually had to be in the name of one of the two cities. And on things where each city has exactly the same objects, that's not a problem, but where you want to have just one, this makes it a lot easier moving forward. The Memo of Understanding for Pension and Retirement Benefits essentially formally assigns the liability for pension obligations and post-employment retirement benefits. So in our case, these are healthcare retirement benefits for personnel assigned to the authority. It calculates the methodology for each city's liability, and it allows for periodic review and adjustments to the methodology when changes in the suppression staffing ratios are made. So what essentially precipitated this need was the fact that essentially, even though both cities ultimately share in the costs of the actual fire department, since they're employees of Pleasanton, there wasn't a formal understanding between the two cities that essentially half of that obligation, or roughly half of it, was Livermore's. This MOU ultimately takes that on. In fact, you've been seeing a footnote in your financial reports for the last couple of years noting that fact, that essentially roughly half of that obligation is ours because those employees ultimately provide services for our city. So we're recommending that you actually adopt these two documents. On January 11th, the Board of Directors, as we noted before, reviewed this and recommended that each of the two city councils move forward with adoption. On February 6th, the Pleasanton City Council adopted a resolution approving both of these documents. And at this time, we are recommending that you approve both the new JPA and the MOU, and we're available and have staff available for questions.
Great, thank you. Questions for staff? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Well, I'll move approval, but also I wanted to make a quick comment. It seems like this is a lot of cleanup going on and lessons learned from past situations. So thank you for working on this. It's further refining the great partnership. Well, I would have liked to have approved this before the Pleasanton Council, but I figure since our name is first anyway in the Livermore Pleasanton, that we'll count that one as a. That's true. Cities typically like to see others leap before they do. So yes, with that, I'll move approval.
I'll second.
If I may, we do have two separate resolutions before you. If the motion is to approve staff's recommendation for both items 6.03 and 6.04, I think that'll carry the day.
And that's exactly what I moved, is staff recommendation for 603 and 04.
Very good, thank
you. Moved by Councilmember Spadowski.
I'll second that, both issues.
Seconded by Councilmember Carling. We've been involved in this from the very beginning here. And again, I agree with Councilmember Spadowski that this is has been a great collaboration, a great joint powers agreement, and certainly compliment the chief here for keeping this ship going in the right direction. And I think this has been a great success and really a model for other cities. So very good, thank you. And with that, I'll call the question.
I was just going to say is that the time I've served on the board, my impression is that the organization is very well run, and I want to thank you.
All right. With that, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Very good. Thank you. Keep doing the great work and protecting the community. All right, moving on to matters initiated. Committee reports. Councilmember Coomber.
Well, I'm going to start with the matter initiated. I wanted to get this in there because I've been rolling around town a lot the last few days while the car was being fixed, and you roll by things like the Layton household down on First Street. I wonder, well, can we get a report from Sunflower Hill, get an update on what's going on with Sunflower Hill and how that project is moving along, or apparently maybe or not, I don't know. But I kind of like to know, and I think that the community deserves to know. We approved that in great anticipation, I think, and I'd like to hear how they're doing with that. And along those same lines.
On that one, would a memo suffice to council? Is that your request that we basically give you a written update?
It would.
Very good.
For me, yeah. good. And the other, involving Sunflower Hill again, I didn't know where we were and would like to know where we were with their contract to continue their good work out at Hageman Farm. I would like to see, what they've donated back to the food banks and the kitchens here in town has been pretty incredible over the last couple of years. I'd love to see that continue, but I don't know where that stands right now.
All right.
Is that it?
Any committee reports?
I've got nothing.
Okay. Councilor Carling.
Thank you. So I had a couple of stop waste meetings since the last time we met, and also a League of California Cities meeting. I did want to just mention regarding stop waste, they're involved in many things, not just what we put out every week in our garbage or our recycling or our green waste, but they're also trying to create ways of reducing the amount of food that goes to landfill. And one of the things that they've recently awarded is a $500,000 award to the city of Livermore and to Oakland for creating what's called a smart cafeteria initiative, and that is to take food that's not used at lunchtime and be able to provide that to families that are in need of food. So I think this is shows some real foresight on their part in terms of trying to deal with food that just goes to the landfill and supporting a program that we already have going on in our own Livermore schools. So I think that's pretty cool. Under matters initiated, some weeks ago, and this gets back to downtown and parking, we had staff bring us some suggestions about parking and what you might do to the east side of Bankhead. I think it'd be incumbent upon us to look at that further, and I'm not exactly sure what the right words are, but I'd like to see that as part of our development, at least to provide temporary parking there. We're going to have a lot of upset for parking on some of the sites close to the Bankhead, and I think in particular for a drop-off zone and or handicap parking, that would be a great place to provide that, at least on a temporary basis. So I'd like for us to move forward a bit more on that one, include that in the plans.
So if I understand the direction there, we will put that into the mix of essentially the overall plan.
Yes.
And then we'll bring back at our first step sort of how that's integrated
Please.
into the overall mix.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Councilor Spadowski.
Sure. A couple meetings to report. On the 5th, Monday the 5th, I was at a LAVTA meeting, the Wheels Bus board meeting, where two items that we discussed. One, entering into a contract for the autonomous vehicle testing in Dublin. They showed us the map of all the roads and where they're going to be testing the autonomous vehicle, and it also includes going across the intersection of Hacienda and Dublin Boulevard, which I think that would be I mentioned it, and the Dublin council members were there, and it's like, wow, that's going to be really interesting to test it on that heavy of an intersection, but they're confident. Again, this may be the first step in Skynet taking over. I don't know, but it's a really exciting opportunity. The other item that we discussed was the city staff made a presentation on the depot and the work progressing on the rehab of the depot. It's going very well. I like all the interactive displays. The Heritage Guild, they had somebody, they commissioned a custom carved cabinet and a bench for the interior. They found a lot of the original equipment. Again, people are coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, I bought this at a flea market and it was from the depot. So people have been holding on to items and now we're getting them back. So that's great. I do have one.
Pulled the ticket window out of the dumpster.
The ticket window out of the dumpster. When they deconstructed the chimney, they found an original piece of the Southern Pacific Railroad rail line that was holding the chimney up inside the chimney, and they verified that this is one of the original pieces of the Transcontinental Railroad. So that's awesome. I do have a concern about the chimney. There's been some the chimney, as it appeared with the original depot, was prior to the earthquake, 1906, right? And afterwards, it was built to a certain dimension and standards. They just put a stovepipe with some brickwork. Apparently, it would be nice to get that recreated. I don't know if it's 100% there right now, but there's some question behind that. So that would be great to get that addressed at some point. Don't really need any info on it now, but I just want to make that, unless you have an update.
So, yeah, staff actually is aware of that and is working on that. We can give you a status memo. But strangely, on things that are really old, it is complicated. But yes, we can actually update you, and we want to make sure that we actually get the small things right.
Okay. And then on the 7th, I was at an East Bay Community Choice Energy meeting. This spring, there will be a rollout to commercial customers, so people will start seeing the information about the Alameda County energy provider that we're all part of, with the exception of Pleasanton, because they decided not to join. And then one thing I wanted to mention, and actually I'll start with a question to the city manager. Again, related to the downtown, what's the status of our outreach effort regarding what's going on with downtown? I want to make sure that our public information and outreach efforts continues, that we are updating residents on every phase, and also what's going on in downtown. So if you can provide me with just a brief update of what are the tools that we're using for outreach at this point?
City Council, as a part of your action, directed that staff actually communicate the council's decision to the community. Based on that, we've taken a number of specific steps. We have put out 2 newsletters, one during your decision-making process and one essentially that arrived in mailboxes last Friday and Saturday, describing your decision and what the major components of that decision were. The newsletter was distributed to essentially all residences within Livermore. Hopefully you all got one. If you don't, we'll have to check into it, because I got mine. It looks very nice. In addition to that, we have been putting information out on our various social media feeds, and today we've started the process of actually beginning to create a frequently asked questions. For example, we put one out on housing today that had to do with essentially income guidelines in the mid-80,000s for a family, because there were questions about, well, what does essentially workforce or affordable housing mean? So we gave some examples of both the income ranges and essentially jobs that would fit that. For example, entry-level teachers, our dispatchers, other folks who work in the downtown would ultimately be eligible for those sorts of. We're going to put out information on traffic and parking and other issues periodically. So essentially our social media, such as Nextdoor and other social media items, and the newsletters have been the 2 items that we've accomplished since your actual action took place.
Okay, so we've utilized social media and the newsletters. I also recall during the process we had other outreach efforts, again through social media, the newsletters, and also through advertisements in the paper. We conducted those, correct?
Yes. Yeah, my recollection is we actually advertised the events.
Okay, so what I would also like to propose, if I have the number of heads nodding here, is that we continue to do the same level of outreach that includes not only social media and the newsletters, but if we need to, advertisements in the paper.
What does need to mean? How do you?
Well, I think if in order to continue to get the word out, I think we need to utilize and need to. Okay, I'll clarify that. We need to use all outreach methods and not just rely on 1 or 2. And if that includes taking ads out in the local paper, then I think we need to do that to reach some people. Okay. Because quite frankly, that's for some people, that's their primary method of learning about what's going on downtown, and we need to make sure that we're clarifying the direction that was given and the decisions that were made.
So, yeah, so I guess I responded to the need to by thinking or assuming that there was some bar that we had to go over before we.
I don't think
what you're really saying is you'd like to
utilize
all
outreach methods available to us.
Right. Okay.
So I think that's.
I mean, you're saying as appropriate.
City
As
attorney's
appropriate.
giving us a stink eye.
I think he's looking for 3 nods.
No, actually, he and I were we trying to figure out is that direction that's clear enough, and I think based on your previous actions in open session and your clarifications tonight, I think if indeed there is a majority of the council that wants to make sure that we don't exclude paid advertising as a part of our outreach effort,
Right.
And that we can include that, then staff will basically respond to that accordingly.
I think it's appropriate.
2, 3, seeing everybody?
Okay, looks like.
All 5? Okay. And then the other item that I want to address, again, related to the downtown, and one of the unfortunate aspects of how this process works and how the meetings are arranged, I believe in addressing a lot of it during matters initiated. And if the camera panned out to the audience right now, most people, with the exception of the very hardcore, will leave right after public comment and not have the opportunity to hear any kind of response or any kind of statement. So I would hope people would stick around, but that's just not the case. So
maybe they're watching at home.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people do watch at home, but I think a lot of our justifications for our decisions are quite simply not heard or missed. And I had evidence of that this weekend. Sunday, I was at Fantasy Books and Games, and as I sometimes do on a Sunday, and exited the store, and there were people with signs. And some, very unfortunate signs, but as I like to do when people are gathered in an area, I'll come up and engage them. And I spent the next, hour while the crowd was there talking with people. And everybody, the 2 main concerns that I heard over and over again were parking and housing requirements. And it was a very interesting conversation with most of the people that were there that were willing to engage. There were some people that just did not want to talk, and that was fine. They don't have to talk to me. They have every right to blow me off like most people do. But most people, when you speak with them one-on-one, they understood the decision-making process that the council engaged in throughout this whole process. And when I say whole process, I'm not just limiting it to the outreach effort. I shouldn't have used air quotes there. It was a very good outreach effort, but the entire process of council meetings and discussions with people, just what we use to make our decisions. And it was quite interesting with the parking. People couldn't really grasp the situation that we have and our goal of replacing, and I should say this, maintaining the current level of parking that we have there now, plus adding the parking required for the new uses, and ending up with a few more spaces. I think that's a huge victory. And most people didn't understand that that was going on. And I think through our outreach efforts, we've shown the maps, but we haven't shown the actual parking spaces associated with that, and have said just in very bold writing, we are keeping all of those spaces that are behind the ale house. We will have that number of spaces available for residents. We are not losing any parking throughout this entire process. So I think that was very important. And when some people would hear the explanation one-on-one, it was, oh, okay, well, what's everybody upset about? Or I actually had, through some of the explanation, people put down the signs and say, oh, okay, I get it now. And so, it is frustrating, in particular with the housing requirements. This isn't a preference. This isn't a wish to build housing that we can move anywhere willy-nilly. There are strings attached. And when you explain some of the limitations on the land to people, another aha moment comes about. And it's like how, we did explain throughout the process that there are limitations, there are requirements to provide affordable housing on these sites. But I believe some people don't believe it coming from me or anybody on the council, and they don't believe it coming from staff. So we have to spend the extra effort to physically, however you could do that, prove to them that we have these limitations on the parcels. And when you explain to them, okay, if you don't meet these requirements, who's cutting the $5 million check? Who's going to fight the state? Who's going to do X, Y, and Z? And that was another aha moment. So it's if people would take the time to call and have these conversations one-on-one, it would clear up a lot of things. But quite frankly, through the entire process, I received, I don't know, maybe 10 emails criticizing us, or from 10 different sources. I don't know if the council is the same way, but our number has been on every outreach material that we've sent out. We're readily available to answer any questions. And it would be nice for people to ask us why we made certain decisions one-on-one. So that's why I'm kind of, rambling here and making sure that we continue the public outreach process and not just sit back and let some of the misinformation spread throughout the community. So I'll stop with that.
Okay. So I've got a few things. I've got, had a half a dozen here of matters initiated, but they're going to, so bear with me for a second. We'll get there quickly. First of all, just continuing on the downtown plan communication, I suggest that we get a display case at the entrance to Stockman's Park that actually shows what we're doing, two-sided and large enough to hold the plans and some renderings and progress updates. And the kind of thing was, if you on the east side of that sign looking west, it tells you what's going to be on the west, and the other side, you see what's going to be on the other side. I think that would help. So do I have heads for that? Okay.
Can I make one request? And I'm nodding my head at the same time as making the request. We need to make sure that some of the information is very clear, not just buried in paragraphs of text, but just retains parking. Just very, here are the number of units and things like that. Because I think when you have plans displayed with big, no one's really going to read the paragraphs. So it has to be more public information, easy to grasp at a glance.
Just like you might have in a newspaper headline, right?
Well, like a rendering of what it looks like,
right.
Looking east and looking west. Yeah.
So you make it good, and you'll have the QR codes, so you get more information, et cetera. The other thing I think that we should leverage is putting a display up at the library. A lot of people go through there, so making sure that we've got the right information there. And what I also have there is a box where we have the newsletter updates and things that people can take it with them. And then the third thing is, and I've talked to some of the business owners downtown, they're interested in posters and putting them up in their establishment so people would know what's happening, because they're behind this. So I think that we have to create the right to put out there. So that is on top of all the other things that we said on the outreach. And some of the other things that just occurred to me, we got the frequently asked questions, but I think given what's going on, frankly, we need the anti-rumor mill of nonsense that's out there, of like some undisclosed loans and 20 millions for this hotel. I mean, people are playing, frankly, fast and loose with a lot of facts. We hear them. I think you came across someone when you were talking to us, like, where did you get that? And we kind of know where they're getting some of that. So the other thing is, apparently, people don't understand what the outline of Stockman's Park is. So let's make that clear, because people are saying, hey, here's the design, let me just step all over it. And so no, you can't. I think we heard that earlier tonight. So then, leveraging on what was initiated earlier about the parking next to the bankhead, I actually would like some evaluation of the phasing options, because I think we've got real choices here. And what are we trying to do? And so as an example, possibly it might be worth trying to get a buffer zone north of the First Street businesses so that they're disturbed the least during the construction. Maybe that means putting the street in first, maybe the surface lot, because those things maybe it can be done sooner than the other stuff, maybe not. I don't know, but I'd like you guys to bring back what are our substantive phasing options and what are our choices, or do we have none? So I just kind of like to know that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the other thing, that leveraging on what Councilman Spadowski was saying, I would like to have for lack of a better word, the Cliff Notes version of the history of the land purchases and the implications for the housing element. Because my impression is this is really complicated and our hands are tied. So lots of people are out there saying, oh, just do this and this and this, and I don't think we can. And I think it would be helpful if we got that written up succinctly so at least people understood what the constraints were here, because we're not completely free. And so I really think it would be helpful if the community was more aware of this, because some of the things that are being suggested are not reasonable. And then finally, so we're good on that? So then I would ask that the city staff coordinate with the Stockman, LDI, and whoever else is appropriate on making sure the May 19th event comes off very well.
The May 19th is a groundbreaking event for the Stockman's Park you're referring to.
Right, I don't know of another one on the 19th.
I just was checking.
Just being clear, and that's why I wanted you to coordinate with the Stockman, yes.
All right. Well, in that vein, let me just, I just got a piece of mail that I glanced at on the way over here about, since we were talking about affordable housing. I think there's something like 27,000 housing units in Livermore, somewhere in that ballpark, 27,000. And right now, there are 47 houses on the market in Livermore. So talk about a tight market, 47 out of 27,000. The median price is $838,000. So it's a difficult market. But I agree. We're getting people that are against a 4-story hotel, but they're in favor of a 5-story parking structure in the same place. People that are talking about Section 8 housing, which is not what we're talking about. People that are suggesting that we're on the take. And I see Andrew Barker is in here, and my 1996 pickup truck is still sitting outside. So if I'm on the take, I'm doing something wrong. Okay, first off to reporting meetings. You may have noticed I was not here at the second meeting in January. I did watch, shows you what my life is about when I'm on out of town, but I did watch the meeting, and I was very impressed with a great job everybody did. But I was in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and running around talking to our congressmen and legislative agenda pushing for the Tri-Valley. One thing that was really impressive is everybody was really impressed at the fact that 5 mayors were in the room, and that we were advocating not simply for our own cities, but we were advocating for the region, and that really made an impression. We had great meetings with the Department of Transportation and Congressman Denham's office about the BART to ACE connection. They're very interested in that and looking to find ways to fund that. I had a great meeting with Senator Feinstein, and she was quite intrigued with the idea of reactivating the Transcontinental Railroad line, because this is where we would be talking about running this DMU-EMU, would be moving along the original Transcontinental Railroad. And she was quite intrigued with the idea of making that happen again, because that actually did go right through Livermore. Another thing we learned was that you may have also heard today that this $1.7 trillion that we have heard talked about from the Trump administration on infrastructure, that money is actually, well, it's all our money, but it's really our money because they're talking about 1.5 trillion of that is going to be local dollars, and that there will be a match of about 200 billion coming from the federal government. Because I maintain if we had that 1.5 trillion in local dollars, we'd be building stuff right now and not waiting for the federal government. But they're talking about perhaps a 10% match. So we're not looking at a lot of help from the feds. But it does mean that a self-help county like Alameda County with our Measure BB funds does put us in a great position. We already have money out there, so we have the opportunity to leverage some of those federal dollars coming back in. Met with representatives from the VA and HUD about developing strategies to help homeless veterans. Mr. Scott is not here, but that was something we had talked about, strategies, and there was a program called Reveille, which is a way of partnering with the property owners and also the Alameda County Stand Down that they do every other year at the Alameda County Fairgrounds. The conference was great. Gave us an opportunity to talk with some of the other mayors about some of their best practices, things that work in their communities that we can apply here in Livermore. Let's see, on the 8th, February 8th, I attended the Night to Shine, which is an amazing prom experience for people with special needs, ages 14 all the way up to beyond 60 years of age. It's an amazing program. Limousines, red carpets, dancing, dining, karaoke, and crowns, because everybody becomes a king and queen of the prom. So it really was an amazing event. Over 500 guests, 500 chaperones, and over 1,000 volunteers. So it was an amazing evening. On the Friday, the 9th, I participated in the Housing Solutions Forum, which was held by the Bay Area Council and the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and I reiterated the importance that it is not just about housing, but it's also ensuring that you have sufficient transit to connect the job centers on the west to the housing centers on the east. On the 11th, I was at the Rally for Love with Councilmember Carling and also Vice Mayor Warner at Asbury Methodist Church. It's the second annual. It was an amazing event also. People talking about knowing your neighbor and inclusiveness and celebrating diversity. This morning, I was at the Alameda County Transportation Commission, the Express Lane 580 Committee. In December, there were 660,000 trips on the Express Lane. We're averaging 33,000 a day, and there's as much of a benefit of 24 miles per hour. People are moving along the freeway better because of the Express Lane. Planning Policy and Ledge Committee, one of the plans to repeal SB1. Now remember, we're already spending those SB1 dollars right now. So if SB1 goes away, we lose that funding. But the Secretary of State's office announced that in December, the campaign to repeal had already received 25% of the required signatures, and they're now closing in on the 585,000 needed to qualify the initiative. RM3, the Regional Measure 3, which is the bridge toll money, that's going to be the Bay Area Toll Authority approved placing that on the regional on the ballot in June, and that's to finance $4.5 billion in projects throughout the Bay Area. It would raise tolls by $1 a month, $1 trip in 2009 on the region's state-owned bridges. Followed by 2 additional $1 increases spread out over 6 years. These, as I said, will appear on ballots in the 9 Bay Area counties on June 5th. So those are the meetings. Matters initiated. I was at, everybody released work to write down. That was awesome. I was at an Innovation Tri-Valley meeting last month, and Five Rivers Aviation was there, and they were talking about the pent-up demand for additional hangars and services in the at the Livermore Airport. And I would just like a status report, because I remember when we voted to bring in the fixed base operator, we were assured not only additional hangars, but also the maintenance facilities. There was going to be a south gas dock to increase safety at the airport, so we didn't have as many crossings on the runways. And at the same time, they were talking about a STEM facility put into a new hangar. And I just want to make sure that we don't get distracted with, because the Five Rivers has been supposed to be moving ahead with these projects, and I think perhaps there's some distraction with this building another hangar for a different purpose, the STEM education program, and where the hangars are that we've been anticipating for several years, where those are. And I want to make sure we don't get lost by chasing some new and look, shiny object. Oh, sorry. So hope we don't get distracted on that. So just if we get an update on where they are, just a simple memo would be fine. I don't need a staff report.
Mayor, if I recall correctly, when they last approached the council, they were planning the STEM center would be the location of the former administration building. They actually have a banner hanging there saying future site of the STEM center.
Right.
So I don't, are they talking about now building hangars and using one of the hangars?
No, they're talking about, this is independent of the hangars in the second phase of Five Rivers. So since Five Rivers is promoting it, I just want to make sure we don't get sidetracked, because this was a separate, completely different entity. And you mentioned the point about the admin building. That's supposed to have been taken down, but they can't take it down until the new fuel equipment is put in place. So I just want to make sure that we don't get distracted. So with that, there being no further business coming before the council, meeting adjourned.